The Akkadian Empire could defeat any army. It could not defeat the sky. When Shar-Kali-Sharri inherited the throne, he inherited perfection on the edge of exhaustion. The roads still functioned. The governors still sent reports. The weights were still standardized. But the margin for error was gone. The empire depended on the north. The Kabul Triangle rain-fed fields that produced massive surpluses of wheat. For decades, the rains had been reliable. Reliable enough that the empire centralized its grain supply. Reliable enough that the standing army grew confident. Reliable enough that kings declared themselves divine. And then the rains stopped. It did not happen in a single year. It happened quietly. The harvest was lighter than expected, and next year, lighter still. By 2200 BCE, atmospheric patterns shifted across the North Atlantic. Modern science calls it the 4.2 kiloyear event. For Mesopotamia, it meant something simpler. The monsoon failed, and it kept trailing. This was not a bad season. It was a generational drought. The northern fields turned brittle. Archaeologists would later find thick layers of wind-blown dust at Tel El 6 feet deep in places. The soil was dead. No worms, no roots, no moisture. Just silence. The empire had centralized its calories. That had been its strength. Now it was its vulnerability. Under the old city-state model, failure in one city did not doom the others. Under the imperial machine, failure in the north meant famine everywhere. The army still needed bread. The bureaucracy still needed rations. The inspectors still needed housing, but the grain was gone. The pyramid of power was collapsing from its base. Shar-Kali-Sharri faced an impossible equation. Feed the north from the south. The southern fields were already strained. The rivers were shrinking too. Intact valves hung above receding waterlines. Canals had to be dredged deeper. But labor was scarce. Men were guarding borders, suppressing unrest, trying to prevent starving migrants from moving south. The empire had been built to manage surplus. It did not know how to manage deficit. And when deficit appears, ideology cracks. If the king is divine, why is the harvest failing? If the king is divine, why are children hungry? The curse of a god began circulating again. The gods, people whispered, had withdrawn protection. The divine experiment had turned into a liability. Because a divine king cannot apologize. He cannot sacrifice himself to appease a higher god. He is the highest god, and when the sky refuses to answer him, the illusion fractures. The first response was retreat. Shar-Kali-Sharri abandoned the northern frontier. The fortresses of the Kabul were recalled. The empire shrank. Resources were redirected toward the southern alluvial core. It was a desperate strategy. Turn the south into a lifeboat. Concentrate grain. Concentrate troops. Concentrate survival. The 4 quarters became 1 quarter. A massive defensive line was constructed. Later texts call it the repeller of the Amorites. A wall meant to hold back desert migrants and nomadic groups. But the wall was not facing an army. It was facing desperation. Families displaced by drought. Herders searching for water. Refugees with nothing to lose. They did not assault the wall directly. They flowed around it, through desert gaps, along unguarded edges. Desperation does not respect geometry. Inside the shrinking empire, pressure intensified. Southern governors were granted authority to raise their own militias. It was practical. Local leaders knew their canals better than distant administrators. They could defend irrigation points more efficiently. And it worked briefly. But power flows to whoever manages crisis. By giving governors military authority, the king created rivals. The empire was decentralizing itself to survive. It was sawing through its own spine. Meanwhile, trust evaporated. The central administration began auditing southern cities more aggressively, looking for hidden surplus. Inspectors counted every jar of oil, every sack of barley. Local officials responded by falsifying records. They hid grain, they lied. On clay tablets in Agolda, the empire still appeared stable. But the data was fiction. The king was making decisions based on a world that no longer existed. The machine was blind. Then came the final fracture. Shar-Kali-Sharri was assassinated, not in a battlefield, not by foreign conquerors. In the palace, the central nervous system of the empire was severed. What followed was chaos so profound that the Sumerian king list recorded it with a single haunting line. Who was king? Who was not king? In 3 years, 4 men claimed the throne. None lasted. Without grain, the standing army dissolved. Professional soldiers became bandits. Fortresses became targets. The imperial standard vanished. The girl lost authority. Every city retreated behind its own walls. The empire did not explode. It seized. The Gutians moved south from the mountains. The Amorites pressed in from the desert. They were not organized empires. They were opportunistic. They exploited vacuum. The Akkadian machine, once the most advanced political structure in the world, could no longer defend its own arteries. The river system fractured. Trade routes splintered. Weights reverted to local standards. The 4 quarters were islands again. Only this time the soil was poorer, the population smaller, the trust broken. The empire had promised order. It delivered dependency. And when the grain stopped growing, the dependency became fatal. The god king had tried to manage the sky. The sky did not comply. In our final episode, we witnessed something stranger than conquest. The capital of the first empire disappears. A god is erased so completely that historians still argue over where it stood. But while the city vanishes, something else survives. Not territory, not wars, an idea. The empire is dead. But the dream of the 4 quarters is about to become immortal.